YouTube. So today we're going to be back at it again with one of our favorite YouTube characters, good old Dogmatic Dave. So just look at that face. Just look at it. So this is one of my favorite things to do, regardless of how not intellectually stimulating this is to review some of this stuff. It is entertaining, to say the least. I do thoroughly enjoy reviewing Professor Dave, so-called, otherwise on this channel known as Dogmatic Dave. So for those of you who don't know, again, Professor Dave Explains is a very large YouTube channel. Last time I reviewed one of his videos, I think he was under 3 million subscribers. Now he's over 3 million subscribers. And yeah, I'm a little dubious of that number for various reasons. Can't prove it, but just a little dubious based on views and things like that when you go to his channel. But we are going to review this video today whereby Dogmatic Dave is reviewing a Joe Rogan podcast with Tucker Carlson on it. And he's reviewing a specific section of it where Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan don't really have a debate. I wouldn't call it that, but have a discussion around evolution, as well as some other things that they discuss about AI and technology and the advancement of technology and things like that. But mostly this is a review of Dogmatic Dave, reviewing Tucker Carlson's opinions on evolution, which, you wouldn't even have to see this video to guess what his opinions are just based on his dogma or his dogmatic nature. And so we're going to bring up, I'm just going to bring up certain points that Dave goes into just to, again, show you how wrong Dave is about certain things and how much rhetoric he uses, how unscientific Dave actually is. So let me preface this before we get into it. We're going to get into it in a little bit, but I am not debating whether or not evolution is true. That's irrelevant. It doesn't matter for the purposes of this video whether or not evolution is true. It's completely irrelevant. But the idea that evolution and the original theory of evolution and Neo-Darwinism as it exists today, that it hasn't had to change and be adapted, and there aren't legitimate, high IQ, highly educated, highly intelligent people that have certain questions about it and criticisms of it and things like that, is utterly ridiculous. And I'm going to thoroughly demonstrate that there are tons of people in the past and today who have legitimate criticisms of what is considered Neo-Darwinism, which Dave, just discredits all. You cannot discredit all these people. It's completely irrelevant what you believe. And again, that's not to say that evolution is true or not true. But to say that there aren't legitimate questions is just ridiculous. But this should be fun. This should be fun. We'll go ahead and get started.
Hey everyone, most of you are aware of my distaste for science deniers of all varieties, but I also can't stand far-right political pundits who spew conspiratorial tripe to amass followers and fortune.
Yes, Dave, Dogmatic Dave. Who could have guessed that not only do you not like, far-right conspiracy theorists and right-wingers and Christians and, creationists and, anybody that has an opposing opinion of your worldview, which you clearly handle in a very mature, intelligent, high IQ, well-adjusted, scientific manner. Who could have guessed that I'm going to guess that you don't like Tucker Carlson, Dogmatic Dave. I'm going to make a guess that not only do you not like Tucker Carlson, you're going to call him names because you're that scientific and you're that articulate. Yeah, Dave, who could have guessed that?
Tucker Carlson is one such tool, but what can I do as a science communicator to address him?
I have a guess. You're going to create a clickbaity video to drive traffic to your very suspect channel with allegedly over 3 million subscribers, because these are the only types of videos that actually drive traffic to your channel. not hardly any of the other videos. It's all debunking flat earthers. That's where you get a lot of views, talking about, Tucker Carlson and right wingers and addressing Matt Walsh. Yeah, literally, because those are the only videos you address. That's what you can do.
Let's take a look. Tucker recently went on Joe Rogan's podcast where he spent 3 hours saying all the insane things you would assume he'd say, but he also spent some time regurgitating anti-evolution Christian apologetics.
Based. Job, Tucker.
This has become one of my specialties as of late, so why don't we do a little analysis of that portion of the podcast?
Yeah, let's show you one of Dogmatic Dave's specialties. This is how he addresses people who question his dogma. So this is Jonathan McLatchie, an actual PhD. Jonathan McLatchie, Dr. Jonathan McLatchie is a Christian writer. Oh, I bet Professor Dave doesn't like that. Well, let's get his background. He's a Christian writer, scholar, and international speaker. Currently, Jonathan works in Seattle at the Discovery Institute, which we know a lot of Professor Dave and a lot of his followers they clearly do not like the Discovery Institute for various reasons. Neither here nor there, but what is his credentials? Because a lot of, Dogmatic Dave and his followers love the appeal to authority. Previously, Jonathan was an assistant professor at Sattler College in Boston, where he lectured biology for 4 years. This is an actual biology professor. He holds a bachelor's degree with honors in forensic biology, a master's degree in evolutionary biology, a second master's degree in medical and molecular bioscience, and a PhD in evolutionary biology. I'm going to guess, because this individual is a Christian and a creationist, that regardless of his credentials and how much more educated he is than Dogmatic Dave in biology, let's see how he interacts with this doctor. So here's an alleged interaction between Dogmatic Dave and McLatchie. Here's part 3 of my ongoing series responding to Mr. Dave Farina's criticism of Professor Mike B. Hayes' work, who is also a creationist doctor, PhD level biologist that clearly Dogmatic Dave doesn't like. How did Dogmatic Dave respond? Get ready for the top search result for your name on both Google and YouTube being me taking a big steamy dump all over your dumb science denying apologist face. McLatchie responded, I'm quaking in my boots. McLatchie, are you willing to acknowledge any of your mistakes and misrepresentations in your video response to Behe? Dogmatic Dave, I didn't make any mistakes and I didn't read your dog bleep blog post. But don't worry, later I'll make a video going through your lies and humiliating you just like I did your other idiot colleagues. Enjoy. I mean, just, you can read this. I don't know, can't verify this or not, but wouldn't surprise me if this is legitimate. This is a legitimate interaction between an actual biologist and Dogmatic Dave, just to demonstrate his, well-adjusted and mature nature. Dogmatic Dave fans. That's embarrassing, by the way.
Artificial intelligence that has the ability to utilize all the information that every human being has on Earth at a level of computing that's far beyond the capabilities of the human mind and all of our supercomputers that currently exist, because it'll design much better computers. It'll use quantum computers. It'll have the ability to recode things and change things. It'll make better versions.
I actually think this is a fairly interesting conversation around AI and the potential of AI and, how it works. Not to really get into much of this, but, I think it's interesting from multiple perspectives in the fact that, people like Dogmatic Dave and atheist and, pure materialistic atheist, which I'm not saying that's what Dogmatic Dave is, but, coming to the conclusions of artificial intelligence and how much superior it's going to be and what it's going to do in the future, really without ever thinking about, from my perspective, that atheists can't really define what life is, in my opinion. They have no good understanding of consciousness. They don't know what consciousness is. They can't define it, especially from a Darwinian perspective. By what Darwinian means did matter come to be conscious? Their understanding of the mind. What is the mind? You'll have some atheists like Matt Dillhunty. Well, the mind is just an emergent property of the brain. Well, you didn't tell me anything. An emergent property, what does that mean? It's illusory? You think your mind is illusory? There's no third party interpreting the world around you? The consequences of that, you're a soulless chimpanzee whose illusory self-consciousness and mind that really doesn't exist because it's an emergent property. Where in the world do you have justification for morality? Why would anything be bad then? Especially if you're an evolutionist. Why would Charles Darwin's racism, rampant racism, in his original theory, why would that be a problem? And what are the consequences of that? Very interesting conversations.
Of itself. So instead of biological evolution, which is very slow, it takes a long time, relatively. It's pretty quick, really, when you think about it. Like how long, it's not that long to go from being a single-celled organism to being a human being flying a plane, really, relatively, over the course of a billion years, if you think about how long the universe has been around. But it's slow compared to technological evolution. 100 years ago, we didn't have shit. And now we could send videos from your phone and it'll hit New Zealand in a second.
Yeah, this is a point that I think gets missed on a lot of people because, our level of technological advancement is impressive, but the consequences of technological advancement blinding people to the fact that, of course, we've had knowledge that has been lost. Look at the architecture of ancient Rome versus the architecture of some generic Walmart building today. It's just the architecture is completely just looks in a lot of ways. I'm not saying in every way, but you look at the architecture of Rome and ancient Egypt and these buildings. To say that that's not impressive is ridiculous. To say that there hasn't been any loss of knowledge or 200 years ago, even further back in time, my ancestors could build their own house and make their own clothes and make their own butter. I guarantee you the average person living in America today can't do any of that. I guarantee you the average person in America couldn't feed themselves. They are completely reliant on technology to the point where, I work in analytics. Without Excel, there are analysts that I know that I've seen who could not do a long division problem without Excel. They could not write the problem out. You go back and you read certain works around philosophy. Where are the impressive philosophers today compared to thousands of years ago? Guys like Plato and Aristotle that are still studied today. Just again, the idea that, even though we have made technological advancement, that there aren't steps that we haven't taken back in terms of many areas. Another interesting conversation.
For sure. It's crazy. The stuff that we have now is beyond imagination. It's essentially magic for people 100 years ago.
Joe is talking about some slightly stonery but legitimately interesting futurism stuff here, and tees up the concept of biological evolution as a comparison.
Which tees you up, Dogmatic Dave, to show your very impressive, cartoon drawing. Your one pager for elementary school children. Sun ignites, moon hit by asteroid, single-celled blue amoeba. Therefore, massive amounts of evolution over, unfathomable amounts of time. Yes, that this is just completely scientific.
Explaining that it's very slow, but clearly articulating the point that nature went from single-celled life forms to modern humans in under 1 billion years. Which is correct. Then
Allegedly.
Joe says that artificial life will become so advanced that it will be like a god.
If that keeps going, it's ultimately going to lead to a life form. And if that life form has now untethered, it doesn't have any problems with biological evolution. Now it's just about information and implementing the technology that's available and then increasing that technology and making it better.
Yeah, imagine the people who are programming a lot of the AI today, who have very similar belief systems to Dogmatic Dave, as if that's not going to hinder the alleged evolution and process. You know, nobody ever talks about that really. The bias that goes into some of the things you can ask various AIs, because there are certain questions you can ask AI, they're not going to answer it correctly. So the idea that it's just going to be untethered progress. I'm not saying that can't happen, but definitely some things that aren't talked about enough.
Better and better. It essentially becomes a god.
But that doesn't make it a god in the sense that the machine, however powerful it is, any more than a backhoe is a god because it can dig a trench faster than 100 men, it is still something that people created.
Tucker twists it around and says it won't be God because we made it, which isn't the point.
No, which you're completely missing the point, Dogmatic Dave, which a lot of people are missing the point, which is the point I made, which is the point Tucker was basically making. Right now, AI mimics intelligence. It's not the same as a human mind. It regurgitates large amounts of information in different ways, is one way to look at it. I'm not saying that's all that it does, and I'm not saying it won't get more impressive than that, but that's the point that Tucker is making, that there could be limits that you're not thinking about. That's the point, which clearly you don't care about because you probably agree with stoner, Rogan.
And then lightly fearmongers a bit regarding AI. That aspect is not terribly relevant or worth discussing, so let's get to the science denial. Is that okay with you, Tuck?
I mean, you know what I mean?
Awesome.
The one thing I'm not going to defend is Tucker Carlson's laugh. And that use of it right there, touche, Dogmatic Dave. For the first time in hours and hours of reviewing your material, you actually did something semi-witty and funny, because that was actually funny. Good for you, Dogmatic Dave. Holy mackerel. Completely surprised me. Good for you. That was kind of funny.
Awesome. Here we go.
If evolution is real, and if there is this constant...
Tucker asks if evolution is real, so he might as well be a flat earther claiming that gravity isn't real.
Yeah. Don't question things that I hold dear to my heart. Don't question my dogmas, because then you're a flat earther and you're no better than, just some low IQ troglodyte or whatever. As if science can tell you what gravity is. What is gravity, Dogmatic Dave? I'd love for you to tell me. They're currently looking for a graviton, that may or may not exist. Maybe they found it, maybe they haven't found it. But I mean, the idea you can't even ask questions about a alleged historical event like evolution, that, the origin of life can't be observed. I mean, and that therefore makes you just a flat earther or something like that. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
I don't know, but it's visible. Like, you can measure it in certain animals.
Joe says we can observe it, which we absolutely can and do every day, so evolution is objectively real. Let's see how this unfolds.
You can measure adaptation.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence that in fact, I think we've kind of given up on the idea of evolution. The theory of evolution as articulated by Darwin is kind of not true.
Pack it up, fellas. Every biologist in the world is wrong and dumb because this guy says so.
Okay. So there are multiple things, there are multiple points being made that Tucker Carlson made around adaptation, which we're going to get into, is if adaptation is the exact same thing as macroevolution, as if adaptation is the entirety of what is considered Neo-Darwinian evolution, the modern Neo-Darwinian understanding of evolution, which we're going to get into. And that you can't, it makes it illegitimate to ask a question about one part of evolution, which begs the question, which of adaptation being under the umbrella of evolution, but as if you can't point certain aspects of a theory out, or an idea out, to criticize or to question. That makes it irrelevant. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And the thing that just completely ridiculous, rhetorical statement that we're going to get into that he just made, that every biologist in the world is wrong. Not every biologist in the world agrees with you, Professor Dave, which we're going to get into. We're going to get into a number, and this isn't the only amount of biologists with PhDs, sometimes multiple degrees, who were professors at Harvard and places like that, who question your dogma, who question Neo-Darwinian, the Neo-Darwinian understanding of evolution. We're going to get into it.
That's right. In one sentence, he reveals his profound stupidity in first regurgitating the creationist trope that evolutionary biology is nothing but the utterances of a 19th century prophet.
Definitely not the utterances of a 19th century prophet, but definitely a weird dude who slept with his cousin. A weird racist dude who slept with his cousin, who had an incestuous relationship with his cousin. Just like Einstein, who you people worship. Yeah, let's go ahead and just so people, yeah. Charles Darwin cousin relationship. Darwin was married to his first cousin, Emma Wedgwood. They had 10 children, but 3 died before the age of 10 from infectious diseases and things like that. Yeah, not a prophet, Professor Dave, but definitely an incestuous dude. Gross. Einstein, same thing with Einstein.
Instead of a thriving field that has grown immensely and would be totally unrecognizable to Darwin, and also that somehow we've given up on evolution, when in reality literally nothing in the entire field of biology is discussed outside of an evolutionary framework. We went from 0 to 60 on Tucker's stupidometer in a single sentence.
Kind of not true.
I mean, again, as if nobody questions it. We're going to get into a ton of people that question it. A ton of very reputable people, a ton of people that have nothing to do with the Creation Institute, or, we're going to get into some of the people, but it's people who don't even adhere to creationism or anything like that. We're going to get into a number of people. So just give it a few minutes.
In what sense?
Now, a lot of people hate Joe. I bet some of you watching hate Joe. I don't. I acknowledge that his platform is problematic and he's part of the obnoxious anti-woke mob, but there is merit to break...
Yeah, don't be a part of the anti-liberal woke mob that kicks people off of platforms and tries to ruin their careers and all that kind of stuff. Don't be interesting and interview people and engage people who have differing opinions and things like that. Yeah, don't do that. I mean, wow.
Breaking down echo chambers, and I've seen him push back on questionable guests, even aggressively. Sometimes his personal biases cause him to deny certain aspects of science, thereby empowering a guest, and the result is the propagation of dangerous misinformation. Other times he has a different kind of science denier on, smells bullshit, and just asks questions until they say something stupid. It's the best he can do given his lack of expertise, and in this moment that's what he settles on.
And yet he's still more entertaining than you are. And much more of a likable person. I have very little in common with Joe Rogan. More than likely from a cultural values, I mean, from a ton of stances. And yet, I'd have a conversation with Joe Rogan. You are extremely off-putting, Professor Dave. Immature and off-putting. That's something I want people to pay attention to. I'm going to mention this again, but when we actually start watching some of these videos, I want you to pay attention to how calm and intelligent these people sound who ask questions that Dogmatic Dave doesn't like, compared to Dogmatic Dave, who actually sounds more intelligent, who sounds like a high IQ, thoughtful, well-adjusted individual. I mean, just, I'll bring that up again, but just to reiterate.
In what sense have we given up on evolution, Tucker?
Well, in the most basic sense, the idea that, all life emerged from a single cell organism and over time, and there would be a fossil record of that, and there's not.
Oh, there's no fossil record, Tuck? Then what about the fossil record? Have you looked into the fossil record to see stromatolites pertaining to unicellular life billions of years ago, and then Ediacaran fauna, and then utterly countless forms generating clearly traceable evolutionary paths over every eon of geological history leading up to extant life? Because if you haven't seen that, a thing which objectively exists, maybe you shouldn't go on an enormous podcast and pretend that it doesn't exist.
Maybe you shouldn't embarrass yourself, Dogmatic Dave, and actually look into the critiques of the fossil record as it relates to Neo-Darwinism, which we will do right now. So here we're going to watch a video here that actually discusses the fossil record. Now this person will be from the Creation Institute or whatever institute that Dave doesn't like, but just to demonstrate Stephen Meyer. So this is a video of Michael Behe, John Lennox, and Stephen Meyer, all PhDs, all highly intelligent individuals, irrelevant in my opinion whether or not you agree with them or not, but just here's some information about the fossil record, which we're going to get into.
Before I turn to my big problem in life, maths, with John Lennox. Punctuated equilibrium. Stephen Jay Gould, the late, and by all accounts, great. He seems to have been a dynamic teacher.
Yeah, we're going to get into that guy too. Stephen Jay Gould, who was a PhD level biologist, along with another PhD level biologist, who criticized the modern theory of evolution, Neo-Darwinism. We're going to get into a little bit of that and why they did it. But here's a little bit of information about the fossil record.
Certainly prolific. The great biologist Stephen Jay Gould, who held, well, you tell me what punctuated equilibrium held and why it doesn't answer the problem.
Well, it was a wonderful new idea. Gould and another paleontologist, Niles Eldredge, formulated this theory in the late 1970s.
Yeah, neither one of these guys are related to the Creation Institute or anything like that, or Answers in Genesis or any other Christian organization that that Dogmatic Dave just completely would dismiss outright, regardless of the level of education and intelligence these men have.
And what they were trying to do is describe the fossil record more accurately.
Oh, they were trying to describe the fossil record more accurately, maybe because it doesn't explain it the way you think it does. Why would they need a new explanation for the fossil record? Stephen, Dr. Meyer, please elaborate.
And what they saw, and what paleontologists saw then and see now even more distinctly, is this pattern of abrupt appearance and what they called stasis, that the basic form of an animal, the basic body plan, will remain constant through long periods of time, either going extinct or continuing to the present day. There would be variation within the constraints of a body plan, but limited variation.
The crocodile appears and remains.
All right. And so what they suggested was that there are these punctuation events where you have this sudden appearance and then this long period of equilibrium, of stasis. And
I mean, just look at how calm and how coherent and how thoughtful and how clear his explanation is. No name calling. He's not getting upset. He's not, calling people morons and using vulgarity or anything like that. He's just explaining a situation between two prior biologists who questioned Neo-Darwinism or had a critique of Neo-Darwinism.
But they wanted to maintain
that evolution takes place in fits and starts.
Exactly. Evolution takes place in fits and starts.
Right.
And so it was a wonderful improvement in our description of the fossil record. But the problem was that Gould and Eldredge never came up with a mechanism that convinced their colleagues in evolutionary biology that evolution could occur so quickly. There was no,
It was a better explanation to match the modern evolutionary theory on what they saw in the fossil record.
It was a good description of the fossil record without a mechanism to explain how that amount of change could occur in those short bursts of time.
The meteor smacks the Earth.
It was a better explanation to fit the theory because of a critique of Neo-Darwinism, which is a point Tucker Carlson is bringing up. Now, I'm not saying he's how he's saying it or what he's saying is actually all that accurate. But to say that the fossil record clearly describes evolution as evolution would have interpreted it, over the decades and in Darwin's time and things like that is completely false. It's completely false.
Exist.
There's not a fossil record of transitionary species, like species that are adapting to its environment.
There's
and they
tons
develop...
of record of adaptation, and you see it in your own life. I mean, I have a lot of dogs. I see adaptation in dogs, through the...
Sure.
Joe pushes back lightly since he is at least somewhat aware that there are countless transitional species in the fossil record, meaning that Tucker is full of shit. Tucker just comes back with, there's tons of record of adaptation, which is exactly what he just said doesn't exist.
Yeah, Tucker's full of crap, and you have guys like this. This is from the National Library of Medicine. So this is the National Center for Biotechnology Information .gov. This is a .gov website. This is from our government. So this is from 2021. The modern synthesis, or Neo-Darwinism, which arose out of the reconciliation of Darwin's theory of natural selection and Mendel's research on genetics, remains the foundation of evolutionary theory. However, since its inception, it has been a lightning rod for criticism. Well, that's not allowed by Dogmatic Dave because all the biologists agree on evolution. It's just settled. Look at my cartoons that I just showed you on my screen. Yeah, clearly not. Let me read this again, and I'll continue. However, since its inception, it has been a lightning rod for criticism, which has ranged from minor quibbles to complete dismissal. Among the most famous of the critics was Stephen Jay Gould, who Dr. Stephen Meyer was just talking about, who in 1980 proclaimed that the modern synthesis was effectively dead. The modern synthesis, that's Neo-Darwinism, it's the modern theory of evolution. This person, Stephen Jay Gould, in 1980, this is 40 years ago, proclaimed that the modern synthesis was effectively dead. Well, who is Stephen Jay Gould? Not him. Well, I don't have him pulled up, but you can easily Google him. PhD level biologist, along with another individual who made this argument. Gould and others claim that the action of natural selection on random mutations was insufficient on its own to explain patterns of macroevolutionary diversity. That's different from adaptation, Dogmatic Dave, is if macroevolution and adaptation are the exact same thing. They're mutually exclusive. It's just ridiculous. Here's Charlesworth, Land, Stalkin, published responses. People have been criticizing Neo-Darwinism for decades. High IQ, highly educated, highly respected people. We'll continue.
Organisms adapt to fit new evolutionary niches or in response to changing environmental stimuli, producing new morphologies as the result of many successive speciation events. Adaptation is part of evolution, you nitwit. Of course, he doesn't even understand the sentence he just spoke, so he immediately pivots to modern dogs, which are specifically not the product of adaptation, but rather artificial selection, so it's literally the worst example he could choose. Okay, Tuck, let's talk about dogs.
No, there's no evidence at all that, none, zero, that, people evolve seamlessly from a single cell amoeba. No, there's not. There's no chain in the fossil record of that at all.
Never mind, no dogs after all, just back to reiterating the same baseless incredulity. Yes, there is completely...
Again with the same fourth grade level cartoon of a graph, or a line of illustrations clearly demonstrating, with empirical observable facts of the moon getting smacked with a red meteorite that we clearly observed. I mean, goodness gracious.
Insurmountable evidence that precisely that did happen. There is so much evidence, in fact, that analysis of this evidence is broken up into completely different fields of science. Anthropologists study the enormous variety of hominid species that diverged from our most recent common ancestor with other extant apes, and also even farther back with more primitive primate forms.
I mean, again, just look at these. Look at these little drawings and cartoons and line drawings.
On a broader scale, paleontologists study fossilized remnants of plants and animals over hundreds of millions of years, each specializing in a particular era or a particular phylogenetic taxon. If you'd ever bothered to get off your ass and learn something, you would have found that all of this information is very easily accessible to you, and you wouldn't say something so profoundly stupid for millions of people to hear.
And that's why you don't actually hear you hear them make reference to evolution, because the theory of adaptation is clearly, obviously true.
There is no theory of adaptation, genius. That's not a thing. Adaptation is an evolutionary process.
Which literally begs the question. Defining adaptation under the umbrella of evolution does not therefore mean you cannot critique pieces and parts of evolution. Even if the theory is true, let's assume the theory is true, it's already had to have been, manipulated and changed, and certain things added to Neo-Darwinism to account for the modern amount of information that's out there. That doesn't negate the fact that adaptation and macroevolution are not necessarily the same thing.
By saying adaptation happens, you are saying evolution happens. If Joe were better equipped to handle this buffoon, he would have asked what Tucker thinks the difference is between adaptation and evolution, and how adaptation occurs mechanistically on the molecular and cellular level, at which point Tucker would shit his pants and change the subject.
But Darwin's theory's totally that's why it's still a theory almost 200 years later. No, we have not found that at all.
And of course, it's not a conversation with a science-denying moron without the still a theory script. Theories do not ever become anything other than theories under any circumstances ever, no matter how well corroborated they are, and evolution by natural selection is as corroborated as any theory can be.
False. You would be highly surprised at the lack of scientific consensus in certain fields and theories, which we're going to demonstrate. The amount of people who critique and have questions and are starting to really, want an adjustment, regardless if they're creationists or not. Some of these people are not creationists, are not associated with some of these other institutions who have serious problems with Neo-Darwinism.
That's why every biologist in the world would laugh in your face if they heard you say any of this, just like any chemist would laugh in your face if you called atomic theory into question.
Yeah, so this is just completely false. I mean, this is just more rhetoric, just to demonstrate the number of biologists who question Neo-Darwinianism or have a critique of it. I've already shown, an example from earlier, but here we're going to go through multiple examples and demonstrate from multiple reputable sources just the amount from a mathematics perspective, from a biological perspective, from multiple perspectives that tons of people, there's not a scientific consensus. And no, every biologist in the world, I've already shown multiple biologists who would disagree with you, Dogmatic Dave. So here's the first video we're going to look at. This is another Joe Rogan podcast that clearly Dogmatic Dave didn't want to, selectively ignore, I guess. But this will be a good starting point for some other information that we're going to get into. But I just want to remind everybody, look how professional and mature and calm and coherent and articulate Stephen Meyer is with Joe Rogan on his ideas. And look how Joe Rogan, who may even disagree with him, doesn't attack the guy just for questioning and having a different opinion on even a scientific topic. This is such a much better exchange.
I believe in I believe in microevolution. I believe that there are real evolutionary processes. I'm skeptical about what's called universal common descent, the idea that all living forms have evolved from one single common ancestor. I'm profoundly skeptical about chemical evolution, the idea that the non-living chemicals in a prebiotic ocean or prebiotic soup arranged themselves to form the first living cell. And I'm also skeptical about the creative power of the mutation selection mechanism, which, as it happens, so are many leading evolutionary biologists today. I tend to.
Oh, you don't say. You don't say, Stephen Meyer. I mean, just look how calm and articulate he is. He sounds like just twice the IQ of Dogmatic Dave.
At a conference in 2016 at convened by the Royal Society in London, Royal Society being the oldest and most august scientific body in the world. And it was convened by a group of evolutionary biologists who were essentially dissatisfied with Neo-Darwinism, the standard textbook theory that we learn in all.
That can't be possible. Dogmatic Dave just showed me a bunch of cartoons and drawings and, just did a really articulate review of Tucker Carlson. There's no way that this is possible. There's absolutely no way. Dogmatic Dave told me so.
High school and college textbooks, and many of them were saying we need a new theory of evolution. The first talk at that conference was given by Gerd Müller, a prominent Austrian evolutionary biologist, and he simply enumerated the five major, what he called explanatory deficits of Neo-Darwinism, and his basic.
Yeah. So that obviously can't be possible, but I mean, we're going to go through some of this information. So who is Gerd B. Müller? Gerd B. Müller, born in 1953, is an Austrian biologist who is emeritus professor at the University of Vienna, where he was the head of the Department of Theoretical Biology in the Center for Organismal Systems Biology. I mean, good night. Müller received an MD in 1979, a PhD in zoology in 1985, but from the University of Vienna. I mean, an actual PhD evolutionary biologist who, what does Wikipedia have to say about this? Scientific contribution. Together with Eva Jablonka, Kevin Lawland, and many others, as well as Dennis Noble and others. Let's see. determined to have the bioorganism period. Mueller is an advocate of an alternate. Mueller's an advocate for an alternative evolutionary framework. I mean, literally questioning modern, at least some aspect of Neo-Darwinism, along with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 other more than likely high IQ, established, esteemed PhD level people. I mean, Kevin Leland, who is working with Gerd Mueller, Kevin Lala, is an English evolutionary biologist who was professor of behavioral and evolutionary biology at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. Who's another individual that Mueller's working with? Dennis Noble. Dennis Noble, born in 1936, is a British sociologist and biologist who held the Burton Sanderson Chair of Cardiovascular Physiology at the University of Oxford from 1984 to 2004 and was appointed Professor Emeritus and co-director of computational physiology. I mean, good night. Noble was educated at the Emmanuel School in the University of College of London. In 1958, he began his investigation into the mechanisms of heartbeat. I mean, these are clearly reputable, high IQ people who many attended this. This is another the National Library of Medicine. This is what Dr. Stephen Meyer was talking about. But again, this is National Library of Medicine.gov. Schism and Synthesis at the Royal Society from 2000. This article is from 2017. Abstract. November 7th through 9th in 2016 witnessed a joint discussion meeting of the Royal Society and the British Academy, the UK National Academies for the Sciences and Social Sciences, respectively, entitled New Trends in Evolutionary Biology. Biological, philosophical, and social science perspectives. The meeting, anticipated with a mix of feverish enthusiasm and dread, sold out months in advance to the eager audience, perhaps expecting radical and traditional evolutionists to go toe-to-toe. What? The audience, let me read this again. The eager audience, perhaps expecting radical and traditional evolutionists? How can there be radical evolutionists? Nobody questions the mainstream narratives around evolution. You know, the eager audience perhaps expecting radical and traditional evolutionists to go toe-to-toe rather than the constructive dialogue among biologists, social scientists, and researchers in the humanities that the academies advertise. One issue under discussion was whether or not the explanatory core of evolutionary biology requires updating in the light on recent advances in various, epigenetics, ecosystems, ecology, and elsewhere. They're going to debate whether or not the mainstream evolutionary Neo-Darwinism needs updates. What? How can that be possible? Here are two really good videos just to go into a little further on how wrong Dave is on people questioning some of this stuff. So this is from the Hoover Institute. This is not the Institute for Creation Science or something like that. But just watch this video. I believe this is a clip with John Lennox, who is a PhD, mathematician and physicist. I mean, this is clearly an intelligent guy, regardless of if you agree with him on God or not.
Wipes out the dinosaurs and creates...
That's the wrong clip. Here we go. This is Lennox.
And one of my examiners at Cambridge was Sir Fred Hoyle.
Sir Fred Hoyle. That's a nobody. Sir Fred Hoyle, 1915 to 2001, English astronomer, formulated the theory of stellar nucleosynthesis, one of the authors of the influential B2FH paper. I mean, clearly a nobody.
And he came to Cardiff, where I was a lecturer many years ago, and he shocked everybody by he just stood up and said to an absolutely packed crowd, because he was famous, he said, life cannot have originated on Earth. And there was a collective gasp, and he said, I've done the calculations, and mathematically it is simply impossible. There isn't enough time.
Yeah, nobody. Yeah, I mean, there's clearly not intelligent people who question certain things about the current macro evolutionary models. Clearly, that's a nobody. Dogmatic Dave. Here's another individual that John Lennox knows.
I think, what cuts all this for me now is not what the mathematicians are saying, but what the mathematically conscious biologists are saying. Now, one of my friends in Oxford is a very distinguished biologist, Professor Dennis Noble.
Yeah, this is a nobody. Dennis Noble, professor, PhD, developed the first mathematical model of cardiac cells in 1960. Clearly a moron. I mean, just clearly a moron. This guy has no idea what he's talking about.
And he has just made absolutely clear. He said Neo-Darwinism, that is the modern synthesis, that
The standard textbook theory that we all learn.
natural selection and mutation doesn't need to be improved, it needs to be replaced. And
What? That's not possible. That's not possible that high IQ, extremely reputable people would question anything that Dogmatic Dave pushes. There's no way. Yes, there's clearly tons of people, tons of high IQ people. We could keep going who question this stuff, or at least have critiques of it, or don't accept everything about the modern Neo-Darwinian understanding of evolution, which is some of the points that Tucker was trying to bring up, maybe in his own way, maybe not saying it correctly, or maybe he doesn't know about some of this stuff. But the idea that people aren't questioning and have differing opinions, and there's just everybody just agrees on everything all the time, that the Dogmatic Dave agrees with, is just ridiculous. It's clearly ridiculous. So I'm going to skip the last few minutes of this video because it just goes on through more, evolutionary rhetoric and whatnot. But just again, this last part of this video, I want to touch on because it's just the level of manipulation and nonsense that Dave pushes. Clearly, I'm not even sure he believes some of this stuff, but I mean, just listen to this last part of this video. Just listen to this. So I just skipped probably like 6 minutes. Around like 5 or 6 minutes.
And their work will probably kill off mankind. It's definitely not going to be ultra-right-wing science-denying evangelicals who manipulate and fearmonger their way into power and then bring us all back to the Dark Ages through brutal subjugation and a militarized police force. There's no risk of that at all.
Oh, he's just laughing.
You know what I mean?
Touche, Dogmatic Dave.
So no.
That is actually funny, but he brings up the point that sarcastically, it's not going to be far right wingers, evangelicals who bring down the jackboots on everybody, as if there isn't political persecution going on in the United States right now, as if there isn't, pun intended, trumped up charges on certain politicians who are clearly being targeted while no investigations whatsoever of other types of politicians are going on. As if Trump is Donald Trump he's a left-wing person? He's considered left-wing and liberal and woke? Or he's actually been charged with a ton of charges, going to court for crimes and things like that are clearly legitimate, as if it's all the right wingers and the people on the right who are getting kicked off of YouTube and getting kicked off of Twitter, and who have historically not obviously not been targeted by the mainstream media. And I mean, Tucker Carlson himself got fired from Fox News. They're the ones in power. It's Tucker Carlson in power who clearly didn't get fired. Yeah, it's people like Tucker Carlson who run Hollywood, and the fact that what is the statistic on academia as it relates to cultural and political slants? What is it? The overwhelming majority of professors across universities, like extremely high percentage of professors, are Democrats, liberals, left wing. As if it's the right wing that owns all the universities and run Yale. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Just ridiculous comments by Dogmatic Dave. But again, we're going to visit Dogmatic Dave again because I'm sure he's going to continue to do the videos that actually get clicks for him. But I hope this was fun. I enjoy this, and I look forward to the next one. Thank you.